Sam always does a great job, and I appreciate him being a part with you guys last week. Now, when Bob says stuff about the color of my shirt and things like that, just don't pay attention to him. Somehow he was hit early on by a 2x4 or something in his head. So he has issues. Just pray for him. Just pray for him. Amen. I heard that. So, John chapter 1, if you would, once you turn, and we're going to get started. Really, the story of John is really a fascinating book. It's the book that closes off the Gospels. There's 4 Gospels. The first 3 are what they call the synoptic Gospels, and it comes from a word that just basically what it sounds like, similar Gospels. And they cover, the first 3 cover basically the same stories, not word for word, but from different points of view from these various authors that were led of the Spirit to record the writings. And each one of them, according to who you listen to, they represent different facets of the Lord. Like I think they say Matthew's like the king, representing the king, and Mark is like the servanthood of Jesus, and Jesus being king, Jesus being the servant, Jesus being not just God, but he's man, and that's where Luke comes in. Well, I've always had a struggle with that. Not that they're wrong or that that's a wrong thought. It's just you really got to cram that in to get it to say those things, and you've got to kind of search and I suppose you can find it, but I find that Jesus is the servant, Jesus is the king, and Jesus is a man amongst the people of the earth. I find that in all 3 of the Gospels, so I find it difficult to make that as a point, and so I kind of shy away from it, but it doesn't mean it's not right. It just means that's just my problem. But I think where John comes from, there's no debate. John is coming from the point of view that Jesus wasn't just a king. Not that a king there's anything less, and don't let me demean that. He wasn't just a servant, though he was a servant, and as magnificent as that is. And he was man as well as 100% God. He was 100% man. True, Luke, true. I get it. But greater than that, I think it stands out that the truth of where John comes from is that Jesus was God, dwelling among us. Great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifested in the flesh, as Paul told Timothy. And it is, that's where this story goes. And it goes from the very get-go, where the other synoptic gospels begin in a Bethlehem scene, perhaps in a manger, like Luke presents to us. And those are things we need to understand about God, that he humbled himself and came into this world as a child and born amongst farm animals that were going to be sacrificed, and he being the ultimate sacrifice. But where John starts, he goes beyond the birth of Jesus coming into this world. And he goes back to the story of where Jesus really comes from. And so we find it in verse 1 as the story unfolds for us. He says, in the beginning was the Word. And it's a favorite word. It seems like Jesus is described in the Gospel of John as the Word. He'll do that also in his small epistles, referring to him as the Word, which it brings all sorts of ideas and thoughts and just understanding about God when John brings this out this way. Led by the Spirit, obviously, but it's something for us to glean. Where he begins is in the beginning was the Word. And verse 1 goes on to say, and the Word was with God. That gives, the word with there gives that familiarity, that it wasn't just something that he was taught, something that he read about. This is something that it comes from a relationship. He was with God, but it even gets even closer than that. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And that's where this gospel is going. He's going to go, this story, he's not going to let it up. He's just going to continue to talk about this story that this one born in Bethlehem that we celebrate as the birth of Christ coming into the world. He really had a different beginning than what we attribute to him so much of the time. He was God, manifested, as he says in verse 14, in case you in case you have some questions on that. It says, in the Word, in verse 14, became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So Jesus, coming into this world, he comes from that place called the beginning. And that's hard for us to understand. It's way out of our understanding of putting things together. We have ideas about beginning. You know, the beginning where before the stars were out there or something. What was that like? Well, I can go back in my mind so far, but in that place, in the beginning is where he comes from. Actually, he tells us in the book of Micah in chapter 5, and I'll just read it to you. He says, but you Bethlehem, Ephrathah, as he says, he's talking about the birth of Jesus. Very familiar verse at Christmas time. We talk about Bethlehem. He says, though Bethlehem was little among the thousands of Judah, talking about Bethlehem, yet out of you shall come forth to me one to be a ruler in Israel. Talking about the birth of Jesus that's going to come to rule the nations, but specifically Israel, whose going forth is from of old, from everlasting. The word everlasting, it takes us to the place that he began this gospel, the Gospel of John, to the beginning. Everlasting, it means the vanishing point, as the Strong's Concordance brings that word out. The vanishing point doesn't seem to fit in a definition, but you think about it, there's a place, if I think back just so far, as far as I can think back, perhaps before there's stars, if you can get that far back in your thinking, I don't know what in the world you're doing, because I have no clue how to get there. But even beyond that, the vanishing point. In other words, when my mind quits thinking back, it has no way to reach back. I have nothing to reference, no reference point. He comes from there. He comes from the vanishing point. But it even gets even deeper than that. In Psalm 90, he talks about him coming into the world, talking about the Lord. You have been the dwelling place in all generations before the mountains were brought forth. Psalm 90 goes on to say, or ever you had formed the earth and the world from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. The words that he uses there, it gives the thought of you come from that vanishing point, but then he adds on from everlasting to everlasting, meaning beyond the vanishing point. So when my mind stops thinking back and I can't think and reference the truth about God in my frame of thinking, he comes from beyond that. So this is talking about the deity of Jesus Christ, that he was God. He comes from this place of the vanishing point. And so he's making the case right off the bat. And this letter will, if you'll read with us in the Gospel of John, you'll see something that's different. That stories that come up are presented in a way that comes from John's point of view, that the Spirit of God wanted him to bring out. Like when Jesus was arrested in the garden, you guys remember that scene? You remember when the soldiers came? Remember the deceiving kiss by Judas Iscariot and all? And what did Jesus say? He said, who are you guys after? Well, got to keep some kind of Elizabethan English in there. Who do you seek after or whatever? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And only John covers this part of the scene. They all fall down. Everybody falls down. And they get up, dust off, and Jesus asks them again, who are you guys looking for? And they said, like a bunch of knuckleheads, they just fell down. I'd be hesitant to answer that question the second time. And they get up and they say, Jesus of Nazareth. And then Jesus says this. He says, then let these guys go. Talking about his disciples, let them go. Because this is who you're after. You're after me. Who was in control? That's what John is showing us. Jesus was not a victim. He was in control. And that's what this gospel is going to tell you over and over again. Just like he starts here, that in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. The Word was God. And he was In the beginning, that place of the vanishing point, he comes from that place that only God dwells. And then the second thing that he brings out in the very beginning of this letter, just so that he's proving the case, he's making the case that Jesus is God. He says, all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. He was the creator. And he wants us to know that. He wasn't just, as so many just keep that title, the Son of God. I understand that you should hold on to it, reverence it. But he was God. He manifested himself in this lifetime to show us the truth about God. He came to reveal what we could not understand about God. God is unknowable. I don't know if we realize the depth of that you cannot know God. Who by searching, Job tells us in chapter 11, who by searching can know God? Nobody can. You're not going to discover things about God unless he reveals it to you. The Father reveals the truth about himself to us. He says in Deuteronomy 29, verse 29, he says that the secret things belong to God, but the things that he has revealed belong to us. See, those things are only revealed to us. And for the most part, we don't know anything about this creator God. He is so beyond anything that we understand. His vastness is beyond us. Deuteronomy describes God as measuring the universe with the span of his hand. That's between the tip of his thumb and his baby finger. When I was in school, it was 17 billion light years, they said. But how in the world they know that? They have a ruler, it's just 17 billion light year. I've got rulers. I got all sorts of rulers in my house, and none of them talking light years on the ruler. I have no idea how they figured that one out. But the truth of it is they realize the vastness of the universe. You know, God says, well, it's only this big. It's about like that. He says he measures the waters, Isaiah 40 goes on to say, in the palm of his hand. Talking about the oceans and all. I got to see the ocean last week when I went out to Oregon. And the ocean, I just saw just the northern part of the Pacific Ocean. But he measures all the waters in the palm of his hand. How vast is God? Well, he created you. He created man. He created the cell. You take a microscope and you look at the makeup of man, and we are vast. I mean, you get into the cell and the makeup of the cell and all the activity that goes in every cell. We've got billions of cells within each of our bodies that are reproducing itself and producing the DNA that's in the nucleus of every one of those cells, and it's producing that in your life and renewing it in our lives. But God created it. Even to this day, man cannot create a cell, a living cell, that will reproduce itself. No, not even close, because man's not going to touch it. Man can't touch it. It's beyond us. We got such an arrogance about us as people that somehow we know more about God than what we really as though we got a handle. No, we're just arrogant people. We pretty much are nothing personal, stupid when it comes to spiritual things. I don't know. I know that it bugs people for me to talk this way, but the truth of it is who in the world do you think you are? Job said one time they came to Job and they said, Job, just get right with God and you'll get out of all these problems that you're in. Remember, Job had all these physical problems and family problem. He lost all of his kids. Remember the book of Job? You guys ever read the Bible? You're looking at me like, Job who? Job. Well, the thing is about Job, they said, well, just get right with God and God will work it out in your life. And he said, how can I work it out with God if he's standing right next to me? Job chapter 9, read it for yourself. If he's standing right here, I couldn't tell you he's there. I couldn't tell you. That's how vast God is. He's unknowable. Actually, he says in Romans chapter 11, he's unsearchable. It means he can't be tracked. You can't track him like you would an animal out in the woods. You're not going to find out his ways. You're not going to find out his direction unless he reveals it to you. Jesus came into the world as the Son of God, and he took on flesh so that he could reveal what is unknowable about God. God is unknowable in and of of ourselves to know the truth about God. But he reveals what all we ever know and will ever know is what he has taught us about God. And that's the purpose of his coming into the world, as God who humbled himself. And though he's in the form of God, he thought it not robbery to be equal with God, Philippians tells us. And he also tells us now that he is the creator. He created heavens and the earth. And that's not a signal. That's not something isolated. We find in various parts of the Bible, that we're, like in Colossians, it talks about Jesus. He says, for by him all things were created. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Hello? You guys still with me? Is there an animal behind me? You guys get so distracted when an animal comes. And don't think I don't see it. I remember one time, you talk about distraction. My wife and I, back early on, before I was a pastor, we had this habit of doing this to get rid of the neck, stiffness and stuff. We were early 30s, but we would do this. There was one time we had a guest speaker that came to that church that we were part of, and for whatever reason, my wife and I did it at the same time, just like that. And that guy, it broke his conscience. His concentration. He just looked at us and stared, and then he went back to his study. I know what it is to be distracted, but those animals behind, they do. Cut it out. Now you guys are doing your neck thing. Hey, the thing of it is, though, the vastness of God is where John begins. And John will not let up until he finishes this book. But it is so phenomenal. We serve a God who is so vast, who wants a relationship with us, and that just blows me away. And the truth of it is to put that on a shelf and think that one day I'll get back at doing that, and waiting with God and listening for his voice. I just think you just really don't know what you're talking about, because he is so vast. And he's actually humbled himself to allow you to come into his presence. But yet we take it as kind of like an option of all these options that we have in our life, as one that just added on. Just throw it on top. We got all these things we're doing. Yeah, just throw it on top, God. I'll get back with you one of these days. No, this is the enchilada. This is what this world's about. Actually, he tells us in Colossians, he created all these things, and for, as he says, visible, the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through him and for him. Everything that we see that's created, including you, were created for him. It says in Revelation chapter 4, verse 11, he says that he created all things, and for his pleasure we are and were created. We're created to bring pleasure to God. And if you miss this point, he's God and you're not. You're just something that he just simply loves and is crazy about. And why, I don't know. But the truth is he loves you and cares for you. But in that, we just take such a flippant view of our relationship when he's offering to us something that's so dynamic. And if we would capture the point, he created all things for his good pleasure. It answers that question. That sitcom kind of a question, like, why are we here? And they make a joke out of it, like nobody can possibly know. I know why we're here. We're here for him. We're created in his image for his pleasure. But the fascinating thing is you'll find the greatest fulfillment in your life when you begin to live for him. It's all of a sudden, it's like you discovered something that is much deeper than what you thought you were going to find in all these other hobbies you got involved in and all these other things you chased after to make you happy. You found the secret of what life is about. It's about him. And that's where he's going with this. He's telling us about a God who created us for his pleasure, a God who not only is eternal and comes from that vanishing point, that place in eternity that we can't even imagine what that was like. And yet he comes from that place. He was never born. He'll never die. I mean, you think about that for a while. That he was never born. Doesn't that blow your mind? Or does that still blow your mind? It does me. I remember the first time I heard that, I was on my tricycle. My Uncle Ernie was talking to my dad, walking across the car porch, and I overheard him talking to my dad, and he just says, and he was never born. Now, they went on talking about other things, but my mind, my little beady brain, I'll tell you, I couldn't get around it. Whoa, stop, Ernie. Uncle Ernie, he had a son by the name of Bert and Ernie. They did. Hey, it's the Keesees. Get used to it. I mean, that's just what we are. But the thing of it is that I couldn't get around it. Even at a young age, I couldn't get around it. And it still puzzles me. It puzzles you. Never born? What is that like? See, we can't even think in eternity. We can't even think with that as a reference in our mind. We think in terms of time. And we're trapped in our mind with time. There has to be a beginning and an end. There has to be an 10 o'clock and an 11 o'clock, whatever. But we're trapped in this. He's not. And he was never born. And that's what he's talking about, that vanishing point. He comes from there. But not only that, but to prove the case that he's God, manifesting himself in the midst of the people, his people. He's the creator. And the third thing that he brings out, and he brings it out in verse 4, and in him was life. And the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. He is the light of life. And that's verbiage that it's hard for us to capture. But where John is going by way of the Spirit, he's talking about the life that was in Jesus is like a light in this dark world. It's like the only light that comes into this dense, dark world is the light of God's life that came into this world when this Jesus came into our midst. We are a people in the midst of darkness. And it just infuriates this world for us to talk like this, but we are in a darkness. And we think, no, not in this scientific, technological world. We are in the enlightened people. We are enlightened to the things. No, we are steeped in darkness. The darkness, we couldn't even see how dark it really is. And he's going to linger on this point of how dark this world really is and how dark our lives are apart from this life, which is the light of man, came into this world. It is so dark and so dense that he says that the darkness, though, as deep as it is, could not comprehend it. The word comprehend has to do with it couldn't understand it. The darkness couldn't understand the light that came, probably because it was so foreign. It was so opposite anything they've ever seen or anything the darkness of this world ever saw. But I like the second definition. It means it couldn't overpower it. And that tells me a lot about life. It tells me a lot about people who feel like they've gone too far. They've messed their life up too bad. No, this light cannot be overpowered by darkness. No matter how far away you get from the things of light and life, the light of God, he's greater still, as he says in Romans chapter 5, that when sin abounds, grace does much more abound. You won't get so far away from God that he can't reach you with the light of life. The truth is, it could not overpower. And he tells us just how dark this world is that we live in. He goes on, he says, verse 6, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. We know him as John the Baptist. This man came as a witness to bear witness to the light that all through him might believe. He was not the light, he's careful to tell us, but was sent to bear witness of the light. That's how dark it is. That's how dark this world is, that we needed somebody to point to the light. Think about it. We're so dense in darkness that like if we were here in the midst of a night and we blocked off any light whatsoever from the windows and somebody lit their little Bic pin, I wouldn't need somebody to announce, here comes the light, it's right there. Nobody has to point. Our eyes go immediately to the light and we see the light. But the darkness was so thick and we live in such a dark world that John the Baptist had to come to show us the light is here. This is the one. The light is coming to the world. That's how blind we really are in our lives apart from God. But he's offering you the light of life if you want it. He's offering you to come into your life, and that light will change your life. He'll give you change from within your heart and begin to permeate then outwardly and affect everything about your body if you want it. But light came into this dark world. And as dark as it was, he goes on to talk about the darkness. He kind of lingers on this point. This was the true light, verse 9, that gives light to every man in the world. This light is meant for everybody. It's not just for certain people. It's not just for chosen people, though we are chosen, but that's a whole nother point. He chooses us on the basis of our choice for him. But the truth of it is it's for everyone. I think of it like if you're here in Crawfordsville and CELP is lighting up the houses in Crawfordsville, you know you can opt out. You can say, I don't want anything to do with CELP. I don't like anybody that works there, and they don't like me. Click, and you click it off. You don't have to have it even come to your house. You can stay in darkness if you want. The truth of it, the light is available to you. If you just turn to it and click it on, the truth of it is light came into this world, and it's available to you. It's for every man, as he says in verse 9. Every man coming into the world. But it says, this is how dark this world is. He says he was in the world, and the world was made through him. And the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Talking about darkness, he came in amongst his own creation. Remember, I told you he's the creator. He's the one that comes from everlasting to everlasting. He comes from that vanishing point. He's the creator, and he walks amongst his creation, and his creation didn't even acknowledge him. It was like the people in the creation just turned their back and refused to turn to him. But the fascinating thing is Jesus came into this gallery of his creation, and the seas knew him. He stood up in a boat one time and said, knock it off. You know, when the white waves were going and the storm was blowing, he says, calm down. And what did they do? Calm down. He even got out of, he even approached the boat one time walking. The water sustained him. Oh, no, they understood. The creation understood who he is. It says in Isaiah chapter 57 that the rocks will cry out. No, excuse me, that the trees will clap their hands. The creation recognized him when he comes. The rocks, he says, when he rode into Jerusalem will cry out. If you guys don't cry out, the rocks will cry out. That'd been a fascinating day, wouldn't it? If all of a sudden you see, hallelujah, coming from rocks. Just, what does this nature know about God? It knows things that we are blind to. The only ones that never really were touched by the light that came into the world for the most part was humans, people that wanted nothing to do with him. Perhaps you. You think you got all the answers. You got it all wired. You got your mind all made up that there can't be a God, a creator who loves you and reaching it. No. Well, you can turn CELP off and you can say, I don't want anything to do with it. I opt out. I don't want to pay the bills. Well, you won't get a bill, but you won't have any light either. That light is for you. Actually, he goes on to talk about it in verse 12. And it's kind of a hinge in all this darkness that he's been talking about. But as many as received him, this one that came into the world, remember I told you he was from eternity past, this one that was the creator, the one who's the bearer of light and life. Well, now he says, as many as receive him, to them he gave the right to become children of God. To those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, not of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man. It's nothing that we thought up. It's nothing that we connived. It comes from the heart of a loving Father, and Jesus is coming with that message that he loves you and desires to come into your life. But we're such darkness. But if you'll just simply receive the light, he says he will give you the power, the authority to become children of God. You'll actually become part of this life of light, and it'll come into your heart, and those changes will begin to take place. As you take the word of God and you invite him into your heart, it'll be like a seed planted in the soil, and that soil will begin to reproduce, and all of a sudden out comes this plant, and then comes life. This life will come if you'll receive the light that's come into this dark world. But most men, and I say that generic, free, it's men and women, but the truth is most will reject him. They want nothing to do with him. But he came into this world with something that we can't even see, a light that had to be introduced by John the Baptist. But that's how dark we are. All the creation even, they understood who was in the midst, but we stubborn, arrogant people turned our back on the creator of heaven and earth. God is so magnificent in all of his ways. He's a light that shines in darkness if you'll receive him. It comes down to choice, and that's what verse 12 is talking about. It's a choice. The Word became flesh, and there's where I read out earlier, and he dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. The Word became flesh. He began to take on flesh, and just like a tent glowing out in the darkness of the summer, out in the desert somewhere, and you see the glow of the light. The word for dwelt there means tabernacled. It was like a tent that glowed. He was a light that was out in the darkness of this world, and he dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. When he came into this world, this light that came, that brought the life to man that would just simply receive it. He came with, as he describes, grace and truth. There are those that have a lot of grace in their life or a lot of truth in their life. You ever met somebody that has a lot of truth in their life? They're hard to be around. I mean, everybody's got to live by their truth. They hammer it all the time. Then there's those on the other side of the stick that are full of grace, and they're sort of like flakes. They're just flaky people. Oh, God so loves all the world. Right? Have you ever met those flaky people? I mean, that thing about Jesus, this light that came into the world, he's full of grace and truth. He's the perfect blend of grace and truth. Yes, there's truth to God and justice to God, but there's also the grace of God if you want it. If you want the truth of God, he'll forgive you. He'll come into your life and start changing you from within if you want it. John bore witness of this light, and he begins to talk about John bearing witness. And he says, and he who comes after me, he says, this is the words of John the Baptist. He's preferred before me for verse 16. And of his fullness we have all received grace for grace. Of his fullness, the fullness of God. Not only was he the perfect blend of grace and truth, but it was the fullness of God. When you saw Jesus, you saw the fullness of God. There was nothing lacking in him. There was nothing that had to be added to Jesus so that you can understand the truth of God. There was nothing that had to be worked out in Jesus before you saw the love of God. No, he was the fullness of God. The body, the fullness of the Godhead bodily was in Jesus. And when you saw him, you saw the light, the glow of the radiance of the light of life. That if you just could understand, the truth is that if you got a glimmer of the light, it's because he's welcoming you. He's trying to draw you. And if you just receive it, he'll give you the power, the authority to become children of his. What a magnificent God we serve. I mean, God is beyond us. And you got to understand this, that he did not have to reach into our lives to touch our lives. But he chose to because of his love for you. So much of the time you believe the lies of the enemy that he's fed up with you. You've gone too far. You made too big a mess. No, the darkness can't overpower this light if you just turn to him. He'll change your life. He'll change everything about your life if you just turn to him. And there you'll begin to see things you never saw before. You'll begin to see a loving God that you didn't realize was always there. He's never been out of your sight, or you've never been out of his sight. He's always seen where you are. He knows everything about you. He knows every hair on your head. Right, Jack? Jack and I make it easy on God. You know, I think actually, you know, when you get to heaven, you're going to find out that that's really the more spiritual people. I think we're all going to be bald in heaven. That's just a thought of mine. I just thought I'd throw it out there. You don't have to believe it. The law came by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ, talking about this one that came into this world, the light of life. And he says, the only begotten Son who's in the bosom of the Father, he's declared him. So he gives us now a fourth definition of God. Jesus is God. Not only did he come from eternity past, what we call the vanishing point, not only is he the creator, not only is he the giver of light and life, but he came to reveal to us the truth about God. Because he is God. He's showing us, he's becoming that bridge between us and God, that which was impossible for us to know. He's reaching us. He's reaching, as he lays his hand on eternity and he lays his hand on us, he's that bridge between us that helps us understand the truth of a loving God. And so you're going to find throughout the scriptures, you're going to find that he's a forgiving God. He's merciful to our sins. If you just turn to him, but in our darkness, we keep arguing and turning away from him, but he's reaching to our lives, trying to draw us into a relationship with him and draw us closer to him. Let me go quickly over John the Baptist's testimony. Remember, I told you he witnessed to the light, his testimony of John. The Jews sent, according to verse 19, priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him who you are. They wanted to know, who is this guy out there in the wilderness? Well, John the Baptist, the one that bore witness to the light, he says, I'm not Elijah. He says, I'm not one of the prophets, and I'm not the Christ. They say in verse 22, then who are you? And what do you say about yourself? And he quotes right out of Isaiah. He says, I am as he says, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord. John was the fulfillment of that prophecy. And he's not the total fulfillment. There is when the Messiah comes the second time, he's going to have another forerunner that comes before him that's going to prepare hearts of people. So when he says, I'm not the Elijah, I'm not the forerunner, he's actually saying I'm not the complete fulfillment of that prophecy. But what he does say, he was a voice of one crying in the wilderness, not in the temple. Where do we find God starting this message? Out in the wilderness, in the barrenness of life. It's almost symbolic that he would reach out into the barren parts of life, and if you'll just open your eyes to what I have for you, you'll see light. The light of God, the light of the truth of God, the life of God. But he comes out into this. John the Baptist was considered the greatest of all prophets of the Old Testament. He says, but the least of these in the kingdom are greater than John, talking about our relationship with Jesus that changes once Jesus rises from the dead. But until that happens, John was the greatest. I mean, you put the list there. That's like Daniel. That's like Isaiah, Jeremiah, greater than all of these. Why? John is unique. He had one foot in the law of the Old Testament and the other foot in the grace of God in the New Testament. And he's pointing to the light that has come into the world. John was unique. He was a priest, a son of a priest, and so he would have been in the priesthood. But he chose to abandon that and go to the wilderness and point to the life of this one that's coming. But in that he was unique. He was out there in his Tarzan suit or whatever he looked like out there, and his, eating bugs. And I mean, John the Baptist was so unique. He didn't look like a priest. He didn't smell like a priest. He's out there in the desert every day. But it was a man that was pointing to the light, and there it was that as he would point to the light, and it says that as they question him, and I find this interesting in verse 25, he says, why then do you baptize if you're not Elijah and not the Christ? Isn't that something? He's pointing to the light, something so glorious. And they want to talk to him about baptism. I find people like that. You try to bring them into Christ, and they want to talk about how you were baptized, or what was that like, and who did that for you, and was it legit? And look, let it go. Let it go. The light has come into the world. And John answers them. He says, I baptize with water, but there's one standing among you that whom you do not know. And that's really the truth of how dark it really is. Verse 26, you do not know. I can't even take the straps of his sandals loose. I'm so unworthy in his presence. Then the next day, all of a sudden, here's John out there, and he sees Jesus. And so now what we started with was the glory of God in eternity in verse 1. And now he's walking the shores of Galilee. And here comes this light into this dark world. And John looks at this one coming towards him, and he says, "Behold, the Lamb of God." And John bore witness of him, and there he baptized Jesus. And that conversation is not here where he says, I should be baptized by you. No, this is just simply he baptized because the Spirit came down and came upon him. And that's what the Father told John the Baptist would be your signal. That is the one that came. And John now says, behold, verse 35, the next day, he says to two of his disciples, and looking at Jesus walking there towards him, he says, "Behold, the Lamb of God." And the two disciples heard him say that, verse 37, and they followed Jesus. Then Jesus turned, and he saw these two disciples following him. And Jesus turned to the disciples that were following him, and he said, and this is the first time you hear Jesus speaking in the Gospel of John. And it's so interesting what he says. He says, what do you seek? In other words, what are you looking for, guys? That's a question everybody has to answer. What do you want? And that's what Jesus asked them. And it's really telling, what are you after? Well, there are those that come to Jesus because they want their marriage to be healed. There's those that come to Jesus because they got a teenager acting like a Comanche. And there's people that come to Jesus because they want to be healed. They got some sickness. And no, what are you seeking? See, it starts by seeking him. And that's the point, is what are you guys after? And they answered him, and I find the answer interesting. Rabbi, he says, where are you staying? And you think that they're asking about his hut or the place that where he's sleeping, but that's not what they're talking about. They're saying, where are you staying? And you find out by verse 39, it says, "Come and see." And Jesus welcomed them, and they came and they saw and they stayed and they remained. And the key is they remained with him. That's what they were asking. Where are you staying? Can we be with you? They're wanting to be with him. That's where it all starts, actually. What are you seeking? Come be with me. And there it says, John tells us that it was about the 10th hour. A 10th hour of the day. My only question is who cares? 10th hour. This is 60 years after John had this experience, and he still remembers. It was about the 10th hour I met Jesus. See, that's the dividing line in my life, was the 10th hour of that day when I followed Jesus. I went to his place, waited with him, and heard him speak. That's really the truth of coming to the Lord, is you never forget that moment when you come to him and you give him that heart. You may not know the date, you may not know the time, but you never forget, I gave my heart at that point. I was 23 when I gave my heart to the Lord. I don't remember the month or the time or the day, but I can remember I was 23 and something changed. And that's what John is saying. It was the 10th hour, and he couldn't get it out of his mind. 60 years later, and it's still in his mind as he thinks about Jesus in that time of coming to him, about the 10th hour. Now the scene changes, and it talks about two of the disciples. And of course, Andrew finds his brother. His brother is Peter, that we know by Peter. His real name is Simon. And when Jesus sees him coming, he says, "Simon, son of Jonah, you shall be called Cephas." That means stone or rocky. I like to think of it like Rocky. You're going to be named Rocky. Simon has always been referred to, and I'm not sure how I can nail this down. I try, and I just can't find references on it. But the truth is, Simon has this kind of a shifting sand element to it. It's not a solid substance. It's like Simon being synonymous of shifting sand. He says, "You shall be called Peter." Now, the thing about this is that that it's going to be a while before he becomes a rock, before he becomes rocky. But at that moment, he came to Jesus. Salvation is a moment in time. It's instantaneous. You give your heart to Christ. But becoming all that he has for you, what he wants of you, what he sees in you, sometimes takes a process of time. And some of you, is a long time. You're dragging your heels. But the thing of it is he sees you. Here's Peter. He comes and he says, you're Simon, but you shall be called Peter. He sees you for what you can become in him. When you come in, that light begins in your heart, that life that comes from the Lord, and it begins to radiate from within, and it begins to shine from without on the outside and changing you in your life. But it starts right there, that born-again experience, that giving of your life to the Lord. And then comes the changes in your heart where you become the rock or whatever it is he's calling you to be, that place that he has in mind for you. Now, the following day, and I'm doing this on purpose. I'm going very quickly, so don't get wondering, why is he skimming over? I want to get to the point of where John, I believe, deliberately wrote in this letter. He didn't write in chapter and verse, but he did write in thought, and his thought ends at the end of this chapter. And we find that in the following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee, and he found Philip. And he said to Philip, "Follow me." Do you realize what Jesus could have dumped on Philip? I mean, think about what the message could have been. I mean, he could have been like a truck backing up. Beep, beep, beep. Back that thing up. And I mean, he's the creator of heaven and earth. He comes from eternity past. All he says to him is, "Follow me." I just find that fascinating. That's really the story of the gospel, that's when you see the light that comes from the light of life, the Lord who brings this into our dark world, and we give our hearts to him. That's all he's asking is, will you just follow me? I think there's a lot of people within the church that carry their Bibles every Sunday to church, and they do it very much, the way they feel that their mom, dad, their grandma, grandpa did, and everything. But they've never abandoned their way to follow after Jesus' way. They've never come to that place of abandoning their path over God's path. That's all he's asking you to do, is now follow me. Follow me. And that's so simple. But it's just so real. It's just what he's wanting of our lives is something that gets down into the very nature of who I am in this dark world and the darkness that permeated my heart. All he's asking me now is this: just keep your eye on the light and follow me. And Philip did. I think that what the gospel is to a husband is just follow Jesus. It's not that you need to take 10 easy steps or read several books before you become a husband. Follow Jesus. It's like the student in school. You don't have to reorient your thinking towards, some kind of a book or take a class. You just follow Jesus. I think that on the job, wherever you work, just follow Jesus. That's the key. That's really what he says to Philip. Guess what? Philip followed him. Philip then followed him to Bethsaida, and he says, and in the city of Andrew, Philip then found Nathanael. And so you can see these guys and the zeal in these. I love young Christians because they just have such a zeal, such an excitement about them, and they want to share it with others. What just happened? I just saw something I never saw before. I just saw the light, and they don't even know how to say it, but they just want to share whatever it is that happened. I can remember those early days and just the joy of I love being around young Christians that don't know anything, don't know squat. And just because they have such a zeal. But there's such a variety of ways they come to the Lord. Philip came because Jesus called him. Nathanael came, and we're going to find out, because Philip went after him. Andrew went after his brother Peter, but Philip just simply came because Jesus offered it to him. The light shined upon him. There's a variety of ways we come to the Lord, but the truth is that's the key, is that you come to the light, that you can get out of this darkness that you're living in and come to a light that's going to change your life. He is so worthy of everything of your life, but it starts right there, to just simply follow him and following after the Lord. Nathanael said, when Philip said, come, I found the Messiah. And he says, he's out of Nazareth. And of course, what is Philip, as he says he's out of Nazareth, Nathanael says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? I don't know the depths of that, but I guess Nazareth was pretty a hick town kind of a thought, to think that the Messiah would come out of. Not only was he baby born in a manger, but he also comes from a no-name town. So he's got, it's like he's deliberately putting him in this place for those that are feeling like they're in the wilderness, that they're in the barrenness of life. He reaches into that area. And if you want him, he'll come. He'll show you. He'll open your eyes. Anything good come out of Nazareth? And of course, that's, I guess you could say, is anything good come out of Las Vegas? Why didn't he come out of Jerusalem? No, he comes from Nazareth. And of course, Philip just said to Nathanael when he says that, come and see. There really is. That's really the call, isn't it? Is just come and see. I mean, there's not a lot that you need to add. There's not a hoop you need to jump through. Why don't you just ask him? Why don't you just come and see? I was flying to Oregon, and I always prayed when I get, because it's such an awkward thing. You're sitting 3 hours, 4 hours next to some stranger. And so I pray about who I sit next to, because I figure it's a moment for me to get a chance to talk. Now, this kid, he's 23 years old. He came and he sat down next to me. And so nothing happened. It was just, we had 2 seats on this side of the plane, 3 seats on that side. It was that kind of a plane. But I can remember him trying to sleep. And so I kept, just bringing it. I didn't want to interrupt him or anything. You want to sleep, you want to sleep. So I just took it like maybe the Lord didn't have something for me to say. So I drug out my Bible. And I read them for a few, hours. And then he woke up, and then he looked at my Bible, and he says, what do you do for a living? Whenever you ask me that, that's as good as saying, tell me everything you know quickly. And so I said, well, I'm a pastor. And I said, what are you up to? And do you live in Oregon? And we're flying in, not Grants Pass, but Milburn. No, all I can think of is Milburn. It's not Milburn. Anyway, it's irrelevant. I said, you have family there? And he says, no, I'm going to go to farms. I got this app where I'm going to go to farms all over the world and work through the summers and get to know people. And I thought, hot dog. I'll tell you, there's something you don't want to miss. And I started talking to him about Jesus Christ. And I said that Jesus, who created everything that you see, is everywhere you're going to go. And if you'll just simply ask him. And I challenged him. And I gave him my phone number so that if his questions, that he was going to call me. But then he told me, well, I'm Jewish. And I thought, hot dog. I said, you don't know how much your people are loved by God. You're the chosen people that God chose to reveal himself to this world. And I had a good talk with him about the Jewish people and about Jesus Christ. And I just had a joy about it. But I had a joy. I don't know about him, but I think he did. I think he really, he says, well, I've got a question for you. And he would do that about 2 or 3 times. I've got a question for you. If you don't mind, would you let me ask you a question? And, do I mind? What are you talking about? That's why I'm here, sitting next to you. And he would ask me about different religions. And he says, how is yours so different? And I had a chance to open that up to his heart and tell him that all religions point the same direction for the most part. They talk about the morality of man, but they don't give you any ability to live for that goal. And the truth of it is that Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. So put that in the mix. I shared with him that he's either I can't remember, but he's either lying to us, or he's really a lunatic, or he's really who he said he is. There's no other options. to say that he is the Lord, the creator? And so I challenged him with this. Not that I had this out or was even thinking about this at that time. But I said, just come and see. Just come. And tonight, before you go to sleep, just ask him, are you real? I want to know you. You know, that's really the truth of all of us. That's the only way you're going to come to a relationship with God, is you've got to come to that place you ask him, I want to know you. Would you show me the truth about you? And there he'll show you. And that's true of anybody here. You may, I don't know who I've talked to. I know I'm on the air, so maybe I'm talking to people out there. But that's where it all begins, is by coming and seeing, taste and see. You're going to find out that he's a loving God. He's so magnificent, isn't he? I just love to wake up in the morning with him. I'm not saying that boastfully. That's the joy of my life. It's like that aha moment. You guys have those places in your life, I'm sure, where you just feel like, easy chair kind of thing. I just love that moment with him in the morning. He is so good and has been for the last 50 years with me. He loves you so dearly. The thing I get out of all of this is how much he does love you guys. He came into this world from eternity. He didn't have to come. He came to reach to you into his creation if you want him. He came with light to show you the path to come into that place of relationship if you choose. But if you choose, he'll give you the power to become a child of his, that authority. He'll give it to you if you just ask him. And now we find if you just come and see. Jesus then saw Nathanael coming after he said this. And very quickly we find out that Jesus said to him, he says, oh, behold, an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. The word guile is in the King James. That's where I always go to. But meaning that he is the real McCoy. And Nathanael's question was legit. He says, when in the world did you ever see me? How do you know I'm a man of no deceit? You know, kind of a thing. He says, I saw you, Nathanael. I saw you under the fig tree when Philip called you. And he said, it must have been a distance away when this fig tree came into the picture, because it startled him. He says, you are the Messiah. You saw me under the fig tree? And, of course, that's where Jesus said, dude. He didn't say dude. But that's just the verbiage of my grandson. My grandson says dude all the time. Hey, dude. He's 4 years old. He calls Grandpa dude. I love that guy. I love my grandkids. But anyway, I don't even know where he got it, because his parents don't talk like that. I walk in the door. They don't say, hey, dude. No, they don't even say that. But he does. But the thing of it is, it's just hilarious. But anyway, he says to him, why am I talking like that? I don't know. But anyway, most assuredly I say unto you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. He says to Nathanael, he says, you think I'm the Messiah because I said I saw you under the fig tree? He says, stick around. You're going to see some great things, greater things than that. He says, you're going to see angels ascending and descending upon the ladder, upon the Son of Man. And he's deliberately taking our thinking to a story in the Old Testament. I hope you're familiar with Jacob when he fled from his brother Esau, and he pulled up a rock and used it like a pillow and slept all night there in Bethel. And of course, then the dream he had was this ladder that extended from the earth to heaven, and he saw angels ascending and descending on the ladder. Well, Jesus just gave us the fifth reason that this book is telling us the truth about God. He says, I am the ladder. The Son of Man is the ladder that bridges between earth and heaven. He's the daysman, the go-between, the mediator that can put his hand on God and put his hand on man and bridge this gulf between us and show us the truth about God that is unknowable unless he did that. He came into this world to show you just what kind of a God, a Father that loves you. When you look at Jesus, you see God. Actually, he'll even say it in the latter end of this book, Philip, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. See, that's the point. He is God, manifested in the flesh with a purpose of bringing light into this dark world. That he is the creator, but the creation didn't receive him. But he came into this world to show us the truth about God. This God that no man has ever seen before. And we can see now the truth about God when we look at Jesus, who is the manifestation, the revealer. He's the mediator between us and God. He's not less than God. He is God. Manifested in the flesh. Tabernacled amongst us. As he says in verse 14. If you just simply will reach to him. If you see the light, any glimmer of that glow from the tent in this dark world, I'm telling you, he's inviting you. And he's offering to you a way to come into a relationship with him. He's the most thrilling thing in all of our lives. And for the most part, we just turn a bored look towards him and fold our hands and think, I will not have that man rule over me. But all of nature realizes the truth about God. And everywhere you look, if you just ask him, if you just come and see, taste and see, Lord, are you really there? I want to know. Would you help me follow you? He'll help you. These are the days you want to get this straight. You don't mess with this that we're talking about. Don't mess with this. Don't think that somehow I'll do it later. I'll just get right with God later. You don't know. You have a later. I mean, are you telling me you know your future? You know, can you see that far ahead of you in life? I can't see that much farther ahead. I thought I could. I thought I knew my direction when I was a kid. I thought I knew Sugar Creek. I found out I don't know Sugar Creek. I was telling everybody in the canoes, it's just around the next bend. Shade State Park. We passed Shade State Park and we were almost within feet of Turkey Run by the time we found out where we were. I don't know where I'm at. That's what life is like. You don't know. Are you going to gamble and put off this truth of God who's come into this world to show us the truth of the light and life of God? I'm telling you, you're passing up on the greatest love story in all of your life is the love story of the Lord and his love for you. Now, you give him your whole heart. And you that are in Christ, go full on for Christ. These are the days that we don't play games with this subject. Today is the day of salvation. I don't know what time frame we have left, but these aren't the days that you gamble, that you have all the time in the world. Things are happening all over the world that are so fascinating. And they're all like red light issues. Like, the buzzers are going off. We're in trouble. Well, where are you with this one that came into the world? It's real. And he really does love you. Father, I thank you for our time here in the Gospel of John. And what a wonderful God you are. As we think about the truth about our lives and how dark it really is, and how blind we are to truth about you. Lord, thanks for mercy. Thank you for your grace. Open our eyes, open our hearts. Help us to see. Help us to understand. What a wonderful God you are. Praise your name. Pray for those that have yet to give their heart to you, ever really surrender their heart. May today be a pivotal point. They'll never forget a moment in time that they surrender their life to you. You know who you are. You know, if you're listening by radio or the internet, you know who you are. If you're in the congregation this morning, maybe you've gotten away from the Lord. Maybe it's a good time for you to turn back. Turn back to the light that has come into this world. Maybe you've never come to the light. Maybe you just simply need to taste and see how good he really is. Father, I pray for those that have drifted off course and they're not where they one time were with you. It's not as exciting to them anymore. What was so enlightening at one time, you were so gracious to us, but it's not like that anymore. Would you draw us closer to you? Would you help us to lay aside the things of this world that weighs us down, the cares of life, the lust for more things, perhaps sin that has blinded. Would you help us lay it aside and come again to you and find mercy? I pray that for people, that they come to know you. I pray, Lord, for those that have never come to you, never ever gave a chance for you to come into their life and shed that light in their heart, light of your life. Would you speak to their hearts here today? I'm going to invite everybody to pray, but this specifically, I'm asking you, if you've never done this, would you ask the Lord today, let me help you with the prayer. I'll just simply lead a prayer. The words are not important. It's your heart. Do you want Jesus? Today's the day. Would you pray with me? I'm going to invite everybody. Pray with me. You that are on the internet, you that are listening by radio, pray with me. Father, thank you for Jesus. You came into this world, the light of life. You came from eternity. They tried to extinguish the light. They put you on a cross. You gave up your life. They buried you in a tomb. But after 3 days, the light arose. You rose again. Rise in my heart. Today I give you my life. I choose to follow you. Fill me with your Spirit. Help me to live for you. In Jesus' name, amen. Keep alive your work, I pray, O Lord. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.